questions. We have tons of them. What if some of those questions can be answered with a simple email? Now is that time, and welcome to Chat with Charlie. Host Stephanie Lynn is a certified spiritual life coach and psychic medium. She will work together with Spirit to answer both your submitted and live questions. Not only will Stephanie be providing you with insight, but also interviews with amazing guests. Now, your host of Chat with Charlie, Stephanie Lynn.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to WLTK-DB Let's Talk Radio. You are tuning into the Chat with Charlie show, and I'm your host, Stephanie Lynn. I'm so excited for everybody to be here today because today's topic, good morning, Jackie, so glad you tuned in, is really one that comes out of so many of our worst fears. It comes from places of despair, places of questioning. And it's something that we don't usually talk about. But we're starting to see some of these, what people call unconventional methods, start moving in and merging with more conventional tools that we use and science. And that's why I'm really excited. Good morning, Joe. Thank you for tuning in. Really excited for today's guest. She is a death doula. She's a psychic medium. She's also a fellow host here on WLTK-DB on No Agenda with Mike and Jen. Please help me welcome psychic medium Jennifer Lee. Good morning. Jen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me this morning.
Oh, thank you for being here. I think, this is a topic that really you don't hear too much about, and it's one that I think, good morning, Jess, that people look at as kind of one that's still tucked under the carpet. You don't openly hear a lot of departments or people talking about working with a psychic medium in what I like to call forensic mediumship. Can you tell a little bit about just your journey before we even get into that forensic mediumship conversation of how you came into, I know you denied your abilities for quite a while. So how you moved into accepting that a little bit, and then how it turned into an avenue of forensic mediumship.
That's a lot of questions.
It is.
So I started to notice, I really came into my abilities when I was in my 40s. Okay. And it happened I feel like I've heard a lot actually from a lot of other mediums after being in a very traumatic situation, right?
Right.
That's what kind of broke this open for me. And that's when I decided that, I need to listen to this. I'm going to follow this and I'm going to develop this. I'm going to go forward with this. Hindsight tells me a lot. Right. I've had abilities for a long time. And like you said, I just kind of pushed them to the side. Didn't really have time to worry about it. I didn't even really understand what was happening.
Absolutely.
Until I came to that healing point from some trauma. Right. And then I have to sit in all these things and I have to learn some things.
Right.
So that's really when I started to take an interest and I started to really develop those abilities and wanted to understand what they were about.
Right.
It kind of just led me down that path naturally.
Okay.
To forensic mediumship. And that's not something that I do a lot. I don't do it as much now as I used to because I've had to become very particular about the cases that I'm willing to take on.
Absolutely.
It's something that you can spend a lot of time, a lot of energy. There's a lot of heartache involved in it. Right. And for me, I can really go down rabbit holes with it. So I have to set those boundaries with myself. So when it comes to those cases, I'm very particular about them. I don't work a lot of them, but I do enjoy doing them. What led me down that path, and we're not going to talk about this a lot, but what led me down that path was actually having a cold case in my own family.
Right.
And I began to receive impressions about that. And so that's what brought up my interest in that. Like, is this possible?
Right.
Is this happening? Can we do this?
And And I think it's interesting because I laugh. So Michael Christopher, of course, is popping in and he says, Steph, how did you manage to get Jen up and coherent this early? And I think it was a struggle for both of us, Michael, actually.
It was a struggle. I
It
was
was a
just saying
struggle.
that.
Yes, we were just talking about that. And if you guys do not know, Michael is the host with Jen on No Agenda with Mike and Jennifer right here on this station. So what I think is interesting, and when I had found out actually from our connection with Michael that you did work in forensic mediumship, I had reached out to you because it's something close to my heart too. I've always had an interest in law and justice and seeing things prevail. And what I really liked as I had looked at forensic mediumship in other classes and different ways, it was always looking at the event, right? So if it was like a kidnapping, it was looking right at that event, getting your impressions. But what I like is how you work through it. You work through it just like a case. Can we talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
process?
I feel like that's important. I feel like if we go right to the event, that we're missing a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things that I like to do is do what I call a psychic profile. And I
Right.
will do a psychic profile of the subject, the person that's missing, or,
Yeah.
whatever of the subject. Because in doing that, we learn a lot about the subject. We learn a lot about the
Yes.
missing person or the murdered person, right? We get
Right.
to learn a lot about them. And that tells us, I mean, that gives us missing pieces. It's like a
Right.
puzzle. So when we understand them, when we can understand their patterns, we can understand their relationships, and we can understand their lifestyle. Those other pieces will naturally, when they come in, they will kind of fall into place.
Absolutely.
I feel like if we are missing that profile of our subject, maybe even of our person of interest, we need to profile them as well.
Yeah.
If we have one. If we don't, this profile of your subject can often lead to the profile, right, of your
Right.
person.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's really important. And I do work those cases. I do work them just as a detective would work them. I
Right.
have to get all the pieces. It doesn't mean no good just to have this impression, right? And
Right.
to go in and to say, I have an impression that's very vague. Let's just say it's water and trees and rocks. What good does that
Yes.
do?
Right. Absolutely.
That has to fit
It
somewhere.
does. It does. And I know, from some of the other classes I took to talking with you and using the method that you use, I feel like I am able to pull together more concise or more detailed information, uh, quality, I guess, or quantity of
Right.
information that ties together versus these things that are coming in and I'm not sure
You
where
don't
they
know where
relate
to
in.
place them.
Right.
Yes.
So
Right.
it's like scattered information versus more collected, coherent information.
Yeah, they are very time consuming because when I do them, I do work them just like I was going to work a case. I work from
Yes.
the beginning. I don't like to have a lot of information.
Right.
And I do see a question here. Joe is asking, when you do a psychic profile, do the police check that with the person's family? So when I am working, so let me tell you how this works. Um, I generally will only work a case, and this is why they're hard, but I will work a
Right.
case with the family. I'll do what is called a cold case review. And so I will sit with the family just like this. It takes a couple of hours, and I will just start, right? I will just start like I would do a mediumship reading or a
Right.
psychic reading. We'll just start with the impressions, and we'll talk through it. We'll make sure that they fit. Um, Oftentimes, just within that 2 hour time frame, very good information comes through.
Yes.
Um, and I don't ever solve cases. I say this all the time.
Right.
I can't solve a case.
No, I
Uh,
love that.
but what I can do is I can give you validation on some points, some things that
Right.
maybe you're already thinking, feeling, knowing about the
Mhm.
situation. Sometimes it's just one piece of information that I can give in that 2 hours
Right.
that the light bulb goes on
Yeah.
for these people. So uh, the police not necessarily checking that profile, no, but that's the thing about working cases, is that there has to be, I don't just pull a case out of the air and say, I'm going to work
Right.
this case, right?
Right.
I have nowhere to take that information.
Right.
It does me no good. I have nobody to validate the impression. Can spend a lot of energy, again, time, heartache, and there's nowhere for it to go.
It is.
So I like to work with an immediate family member, somebody that has some of that information.
Okay.
And in addition, they have to have some place to take that information, somebody
Right.
that's going to follow up on that.
Right.
Because on my end, I can give you all the information that I have, but if nobody's following up on that, that has the authority to do that,
Right.
such as forensics, boots on the ground, searching
Absolutely.
a spot, whatever it might be, we're not getting anywhere.
No.
So
Right.
to work a case requires this criteria.
It's a teamwork. It's a full circle involvement,
Absolutely.
and you have to have that. Good morning, Diana. Thank you for tuning in. On that note, I wanted to kind of look at, why do you think that people are reluctant to go to a psychic or a medium? I feel like there's people who are very reluctant, and then people who jump on that right away.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's such a stigma with using that additional tool? Because I look at us as tools in that aspect.
I think that it's twofold there. I think that the stigma is just there, number one, right? It's
Right.
just there. And number two, I look at the other end of this. I cannot imagine, I really
Right.
cannot imagine how many people are contacting people, especially in these high profile cases.
Absolutely.
We have what are called armchair detectives, right? People that
Yes.
are just, and these people come up with some really good information. They
Right.
really do. They really work at it. We have psychics, we have mediums that are always chiming in,
Right.
So it becomes hard to be taken seriously. They can't follow all of those leads,
No.
which is why I work cases as I do.
Right.
There has to be what I call the real world work.
Yes.
That goes behind what I do. It has to make sense.
Right.
It's the only way that you can present it. So I do feel like there is a hesitation there because, like I was talking about earlier, if you don't have the credibility and everybody's just throwing stuff at you,
right.
Absolutely.
And you can waste time. You can waste valuable time in that overwhelming. And we know, I mean, in any field, you have people who are very professional in their field, very educated in their field, and people who are not. And this is no different. And so I think you're right. People who are just throwing out information, or, and I think you and I have had this conversation. Let's say you're working a missing persons case, and you're like, well, okay, I see the woods. Well, that's so vague. And so if you're just throwing out these, these little pieces, and I know sometimes that's how it does start. You might see trees, but if you just are grabbing the information and not examining it or feeling into it, I feel like that causes this overload where they have started to just dismiss people in this field.
Yes, it really does. And like I said, I can't imagine being an investigator on a case and just having all of this come at you all of the time. I think that plays into it a lot.
Yes. Good morning, Brittany. We have a question from Jamie, and she says, how do you handle those cases mentally and emotionally? I'm sure there's great satisfaction if you've helped, but sadness and such too. I can't imagine.
I handle it very much like I do just when I'm doing my readings. I'm here to do a job, right? And of course, I do it with compassion. I do it with empathy, but I also have to take a step back from it. Right. And I have to realize that it's not mine. And I've seen some stuff that's not pretty.
Yeah, right.
And the situations, really, it's just about learning that. It's just about learning how to release it when you're done and how not to carry it. Sometimes that's a lot easier said than done.
Absolutely. And I know, when you and I had first started talking, I know I And I don't know if you ever go through, feeling or self-experiencing some of those things,
Yes.
but I had a situation where I sat up in bed, I had been sleeping and choking because I could feel the dirt in my mouth. And, my husband's like, "Are you okay?" And I had really experienced so much of what that person had experienced. And, for me, what I had to learn to do in any of this, because whether you're, like you said, working a case, or even if you're sitting down for readings, there's people who show you things of how they passed, or you feel things related to that, of looking at it like a movie, trying to see it, letting the emotion go through with the movie, but trying to view it that way, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Not putting yourself in the middle of it emotionally,
Right.
which is tough to do sometimes. It really, really is tough to do.
It is. And it is like an obsession too, where, you do have to find that way to step back, because at least for me, you feel like you might be making progress or onto something. And so you want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Mhm.
And you have to be able to disconnect from the client of that case that you're working. But sometimes that is hard to do.
It is. And the other thing is you have to know when to disconnect from the case.
Yes.
Oftentimes that is before the case is solved. You've done what you can do. You've given the information that you can.
Right.
And the other thing is sometimes we don't ever know. Sometimes I don't know the resolution of a case. I don't know how it
Absolutely.
ever ended up.
No. And that's, for me, coming from where I used to be a dispatcher, and, it was kind of, and I tried to look at this kind of the same way, where the call would come in, I would get the information I could, I would relay it out, to the officers or fire department, whoever I was sending. And then that was it. I relayed the information. I gave them what I could, and I didn't always know. So it's kind of, I try to relate it in that aspect and move through that frustration. Before we go, we have a few minutes before we go to our first station break. What have you found, I guess, is the most useful? I know we talked about, looking at it and working it like a case, starting with the profile. But as you start to deepen that, whether it's looking at a missing person or someone that's been victimized, once you create that profile, how do you feel you start to connect the pieces to deepen the understanding of the situation?
So all of this is what's interesting, but all of this can be done very quickly. It can be done just in that 90-minute, 2-hour session. You can get the profile, and I don't really know how to say how I connect the pieces. The pieces
Right.
just kind of start coming in, right?
Right.
And usually I'll make a list. Sometimes I'm drawing a map. Sometimes I'm drawing an area. Sometimes I'm seeing a car, a specific vehicle. Sometimes I'm seeing a person. And when that information is relayed, somehow those pieces just click.
Connect.
It's just
Yes.
like doing a reading, right? Sometimes I
Right.
don't know why I'm seeing it. But when that is forwarded
Right.
to the sitter, they understand that piece.
Yes.
And so I have to rely on them a lot to, as we're having that conversation, this is what I'm seeing. Would you understand this?
Right.
And
And
then
so, no,
they-
and I think that's a great point. And I know, like, we have talked, where I typed out my notes versus what I wrote.
Yes.
And things are lost in the drawings and the notes that are not connected into what I type out. And so the difference between someone looking at the things you drew that might resonate versus the layout. So I love that. So when we come back, I think I'm going to talk about that importance of actually writing things out and kind of
Yes.
connecting. So we will be back in just a moment. Good morning, everybody. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to Chat with Charlie on WLTK-DB.com. It's about 21 past the hour, and I am sitting down with psychic medium and death doula Jennifer Lee, and we've been talking about forensic mediumship. So if you're just tuning in, be sure you hop back on and catch the rest of the show later on download. So before we went to break, Jen, we were talking about, gathering your notes within that process. And I know we had talked about when you're turning over information, it's nice to have everything in a nice layout.
Yes.
But keeping those notes, right? Because sometimes we might have doodles or things on there, which was a great learning point for me, because I had, I would write it down, I would type it up nice and send it to you, and then I would throw it away. And when I was actually showing you the written notes, the doodles make sense.
Yes.
And so what would you, tell somebody who maybe is just starting to feel drawn to the forensic mediumship and, keeping those notebooks, keeping those things?
You have to keep them. It's so, a lot of times we're writing our notes and I'm off on the side drawing some kind of weird squiggle that I feel like is a doodle. Maybe I don't understand what it is. I'm writing a random word. So when I go to type this up in like a format that somebody would read, I leave it out because I don't understand exactly what it means. Every single thing in there is very, very important. And again, we talk about hindsight, right? We can go back and we're like, I had that written, like I understand what that is. So it's very important to keep them. Notes become, I have pages and pages and pages of notes on files, and I have things that are written, but I can always go back to those notes, and usually I can find something in there that maybe I wasn't thinking about at the time. Like I didn't know really where it fit.
Yeah.
We have to look at this in mediumship and psychic stuff, the first impressions, right? We always say this all the time, even if we don't know what it means. So a lot of your first impressions, a lot of your scribbles, maybe a random number that you've written, will make sense in the bigger picture. So I never throw those away.
Yeah, I like that. And hello to everybody that is tuning in. I appreciate you guys being here. Good morning.
I also feel that it's important how it's written in the notes, because maybe when we go through our notes, we're pulling it together, we're trying to make it sound nice and put it in a format somebody would read. Girl, my notes don't look anything like that. They are scribbled all over.
Yes.
And I've learned that even the order that I write them, maybe something's at the top of the page, something's at the bottom, over on the side, I've done a weird thing. All of that is very, very important. All of that tells a picture that sometimes we miss in translation when we're trying to write it out.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. I keep all of them.
And I think, a lot of times, and this was a lesson for me, we look at things we don't understand as not being accurate because we don't understand them. And it's not that they're wrong. It's just the understanding hasn't come yet. Those connections haven't been made yet.
Correct. I'll give you an example of that. It's very interesting. A case that I was working some years ago, I kept getting these really random impressions. I kept getting like a turtle and then a jumping horse. Like it was actually like jumping fence horse. And just these really strange impressions. I thought, what are these? I'm not understanding these. But I wrote them all down and I would write them down in the order as they came.
Okay.
And then I came across a very, very handy tool, which is Google Maps.
Right.
Okay. And so if you have the last known location, the exact last known location where somebody was, you can do this thing. I can do this thing called energy tracing, right?
Right.
I can feel their energy at that location and I will actually follow the streets. I'll come to like maybe an intersection. They went right. Like I just know they went right.
Right.
They went left here. What I found from those odd impressions when I went to do this with this case was the turtle was a Shell station that was right on the road. And I knew right there, I turned this way. And then I came to, that put me on a road that was literally called like Jumping Horse Road.
Wow.
So I'm following that until my intuition, until that next prompt comes in, right? And it leads me to this location that makes a lot of sense for the case, makes a lot of sense. So interestingly enough, We actually, on that case, were able to get a ground search
Wow.
going in that area. And here's another thing that happens. This person that was missing was originally from Minnesota. However, he was not in the state of Minnesota when he was
Right.
missing. He was not currently living there. One thing was found on that search, which was really, really mind-blowing. It was buried in the mud. It was a sweatshirt that said Minnesota across it.
Yeah.
So, you
Right.
know, those things, it's like,
And
okay.
that gives me goosebumps. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Right.
the one thing that was found there. And of course, that's what bagged and what they call bagged and tagged and taken,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
things. So, yeah, you have to listen to those. You know,
Yeah.
a turtle made no sense at all to me.
Right. Right.
Until I got to the maps and I realized this is a map. This is where it's telling me to turn. This is how I'm getting this direction.
Yes. And I like, we were talking before the show of it's not a 20-minute ID channel special where, the psychic comes in and spirit tells us bam, 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 and we draw out this map and here you go. And they go and they recover somebody or something. It's a process. Spirit does give us a map, but sometimes in symbols we don't understand and things that it's not just laid out on a silver platter.
No, it's not. It would be nice if it was.
Right. Right. It would be like, great. It would make it so much easier for everybody.
It would. But it's not. It usually comes in impressions. It comes in small clues. But the thing is that one of those impressions or one of those clues I've learned is often enough that the family is understanding.
Yes.
They understand which direction they need to go with their detectives or their private investigator or whatever.
Absolutely.
And take it over from there. I can't work a case from start to finish.
Right.
I just cannot do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much
there is
into it. So I like to do, again, like I said, the review, right? When I get on, I want to get those impressions out.
Absolutely.
And then I'll write something up.
And what would you tell people? So, I know there's people that are in these situations where, like you said, cold case situations that it's been years, the cases have gone cold, they're not able to find leads, and they're just really, they're desperate. They're desperate for any kind of information that might help bring closure to the situation. If somebody is in that situation and they are looking for somebody like you or for somebody to help, what advice do you give them?
What advice would I give them in looking for somebody to help?
Yeah.
To be selective.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would ask them to be very selective in who they're and if they're feeling off about it at all,
yes,
they don't need to work with them anymore. I feel that there's a lot of ethics that go along with this, right?
Yes.
I will never, ever, ever say this is the person that did it, or this is who I think your suspect is, ever. What I will do is maybe I will draw a picture of somebody or I will describe somebody.
Yes.
And I like to use the phrase, this person has knowledge of, because honestly,
I like that.
All I know. That's all I know. This person has knowledge of. Maybe this person doesn't even understand or know what they know about it.
Yes.
I'm not saying that they are a guilty party. I'm just saying they have knowledge of. It's worth revisiting.
Yes.
If this person can talk to you, if your detective can reach out to this person again, there's something that they know. Take a closer look at what this person may know that can help you. So I feel like it's really important the way that the psychic or the medium is speaking about things. If you have somebody that comes in and says, oh, it's this, this, and this, and I know it.
Yeah.
That's a big red flag.
Right. And I know for me, it's concerning. And I know, when I finally opened up to my abilities and I'm like, okay. And then it was, you kind of go through that phase where you're like, hey, do you want a message? Hey, do you want a message? Because I didn't have control. Right. So it was like, hey, if you want a message, everybody gets a message. But, and it kind of, I feel like people, not that they don't mean well, but people who are seeking out, like these unsolved cases and reaching out to the family versus letting the family find them. worries me sometimes. Not, and I'm
Yes.
not saying not all of them are in the right, but if someone's reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, I'll find them, pay me this much money," be hesitant, people. Be
Yes.
hesitant.
Also, I would tell them to please understand that just like you were saying earlier, the psychic, the medium is
Right.
another tool.
Yes,
It's just another tool. It's just another, tool
absolutely.
in the toolbox. They can give you some what I like to call hints from another
Yeah,
perspective, right? Or
right,
or or just look at things differently. But very rarely are they just going to come in there and be able to solve the case.
right.
It does not work that way.
No,
So I feel like a lot of people would be disappointed if that's what they're expecting.
I agree. And I think that's a great perspective. And to spare people, they're already in this place of pain and
Yes.
not ending grieving. I don't feel like you can finish your grieving process in the unknown and the not knowing. And I think that can be easily taken advantage of.
Oh, absolutely it can.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just, yes, people, if you're listening, if you're thinking of somebody and you're like, this might help, just please be careful in the process that you choose. How, when you're working with different clients, and like you said, you have to have that middle person. So you have to, they have to have a connection to, a department, a detective, a private investigator.
Yes.
How do they bridge, that topic of wanting to bring in another tool? How do you feel that's received?
I've never it's actually that's why that relationship is so important, right?
Right.
That's why that third relationship is important. I feel if you're working with a department, a detective, a private investigator, and it's really the way the information is brought to them, which is why I say it's so important that you have the profile and that you can
Right.
make those pieces fit before you bring it forward.
Yeah.
And when they fit, and when it looks like you have actually spent some time and done the real work, right?
Right.
Make sure that the impressions make sense.
Yes.
It's received
Yeah.
very
I
well.
like that.
Yeah, it's received very well. And generally, I'm not the one that's having direct contact
Right.
with the private investigator, or I have. There are a few
Right.
that I do work with. Had a couple reach out to me for some things. Um, but it's just really important that's why I'm so picky on the cases.
Yes. Yeah.
That
No,
relationship
I
has to
understand.
be there.
Right.
So for me as a psychic, if I were just to approach a police department, let's say,
Yes.
say, I've been working on this case, I have this, this, and this, they're probably going to look at me like I have three heads. And they're
Right.
going to,
Right. They're gonna be like,
right?
okay, we'll file this right in the shredder.
Yes,
That's where it's gonna
here it
go.
goes. We'll look
Yes.
at this later.
Right.
But the detective and the family usually already has this relationship built,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, there's an understanding. So if the family is to come to them and say, look, can you really look at this? Um, there's this, and this. That's what bridges that
Yeah.
gap.
I like that. And I like, with the cold cases is bringing in some of that closure, but it being a cold case, it also gives you that time to sit and to methodically go through the case versus somebody that
Yes.
calls you and says, my husband was just abducted off the porch. I need you to find him. Because then you're really in that time crunch of trying to get accurate information and look at everything, but still try to give things that might help.
Yeah, and those I will tell you are also very, very, very difficult cases to work. And the
Yes,
reason is the energy is swirling around them.
absolutely.
Generally, people are moving. So,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
If you've been abducted, this person is taking you, that energy is moving. And so to
Absolutely.
catch up to that energy is nearly impossible.
Right.
You might pick up a certain spot, but by the time you can actually get there, they've already moved forward.
Right. Right.
Right? That energy is moving, 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 moving. So those are actually very, very, very difficult cases.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree. And I would feel like for me, having the time to look at things, I would feel would give me an opportunity to make sure things were reviewed and really resonated, versus all the emotion then that I as a person would be feeling, and that pressure to try to help, I feel like clouds a lot of things for me anyway. I feel like it
Right.
would.
And also I feel like that there's a point where a psychic or a medium can come in. It's not always right in the beginning.
Right. I like
It's
that.
not necessary. It doesn't need to be brought in right then, right?
Right.
You have the people doing what they're supposed to be doing. Sometimes you can actually hinder a case.
Absolutely.
So you have to be very discerning about that.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right. The colder the case, the easier it is to work, at least for me.
Yeah. And
There's
I think
no time crunch. You
there's
can
not.
just let it
And
flow.
while there's still involvement in that emotion, I feel like it's easier to detach yourself a little bit. Not always, because sometimes things tend to stick around, but I feel like it's easier to detach and create that space.
And you were talking about closure for the family. Sometimes closure comes in very strange ways. You know, I had a case where I was talking to a woman, and it was a very, very old case. It was 35 plus years. And really, her thing was, what happened to my sister?
Right.
She knew that they were never going to probably be able to find her. She knew I was not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But we had a lovely, lovely conversation with the sister. The sister was able to tell us some things, as well as that very validating information that we get with evidential mediumship, right?
Right.
So that she knew that that's who we had, and she was able to tell us the story. That's what she needed.
Yeah.
That's what she needed.
Right.
You know, it had already been years, and she's like, we're probably never going to find her. But I
gave that connection.
I understand. You validated what I was thinking. So sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah, I love that. And it's all about healing, right? It's not, I don't have interest in working forensic mediumship for people to be like, oh my goodness. No, it's about healing. This whole process is about giving people ways to help heal and bring closure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we let you go, Jen, tell people a little bit more about what you do outside of the forensic mediumship, and then how they can find you.
So you did mention that I am a death doula. If you guys don't understand what that is, that's just really about, we have, I guess they're called birth doulas, right?
Yes.
When we come into this world. So being a death doula is just really about honoring the process of transitioning from this world back to spirit. Right. And it's working with clients. It's working with those that are passing, and making that transition. So that's what that is. And again, I do the psychic readings, and I do mediumship. So
when people, absolutely. And I do, when people, and I've thought of this before when we had talked, and I never got to ask you the question, but if somebody's looking, for a death doula, like I know when my father-in-law was on hospice, some of that support would be nice. Do you work in conjunction with hospice, or how do people that may be having somebody that's ready to transition get that extra support?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me, jenniferleepsychic.com. You can find me on my Facebook group. I have a couple of other social media accounts that are just getting up and running.
Yes.
But yes, shoot me a message. I definitely have worked alongside them.
Okay.
And really that's what it is. It's additional support. It's additional support for the person that is transitioning, as well as the family. So, it's about being able to talk about what they're feeling about transitioning, and just having those conversations that are sometimes really hard for the family. But they need to be talked about.
They do. And I like that, because I feel like a lot of times when people transition, we hold back talking about them. We hold back, because there's pain in that, right? There's not pain for them, but there's pain in our loss, where we've really, and I went through this with my youngest child, where he didn't want to talk about his grandfather because he was afraid he would upset my husband. He was afraid that would bring too much emotion. And now he understands, no, that's how this person lives on. They live on through us. They live on through celebrating who they were in our life.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think that really sums it up. It's about celebrating their life while they're still living.
Absolutely. Well, Jennifer, it has been such a pleasure to have you on, and I appreciate, getting to know you outside of this platform and just the work that you do to advocate for people, to advocate for healing. And so I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. And that went really quick.
It did. The time just flew by. We just have so much fun talking, and no technical issues. So hurrah.
So perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We will be back in just a moment with your inspiration for the week ahead and to tell you what I have coming up right here on the Chat with Charlie show. See you in just a second. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to WLTK-DB Let's Talk Radio, where you are joining the Chat with Charlie show, and I am your host, Stephanie Lynn. It's about 43 past the hour. If you are just tuning in, we just said goodbye to our amazing guest today, psychic medium Jennifer Lee. She is also a co-host of No Agenda right here on WLTK-DB with Mike and Jen. And that airs on Mondays at noon. So if you haven't checked out that show yet, please tune in. They're just fantastic people. So what have we learned today? We've learned there's other options. We've learned that the psychic mediumship, the metaphysical, is starting to be seen more as a valuable tool and an option. It's still a little bit taboo when you look at different realms, but if you are seeking help for something like that in forensic mediumship, there are people out there that you can find that will help look at some of those things and try to give you a little bit of a different perspective if they can. So please, that's what this platform is about, is educating people and letting you know what's out there. All right, before we get to what's coming up on the show, I think we should do a game, right? Because if you were here a couple weeks ago, we worked with the Zener cards, you worked on your intuition, and Spirit's really like, there's a lot of you out there who are not working on your intuition, who should be. So I have this really cool tote. It says, Stay Wild, Moonchild. So if you're interested in winning this is going to be our prize. I want you to tune in, right? I have this box, the mysterious box. And there is something in this box. Then you can tune into this box, connect with this box. This box will sit right here in my office behind me until next Thursday. So send me an email at chatwcharlie.com if you think you know what is in the box. I will review the emails as they are received, and the first person to correctly get what is in the box will win that lovely, lovely tote. So make sure you do that, because we got to work on this, guys. It's one thing to tune in here. It's one thing to tune into the other shows to get the messages, but you can connect to Spirit just like we can, maybe on different levels, but there's no reason why you can't start building that trust with your guides, with Spirit. That's the point of this. So one more time. Here's the box. Oh, you do have a clue, Diana. You're just not focusing because it's easier to say, I don't know, right? Because we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to say, oh, and I'm guilty of this too. You guys come on my platform and, I'm supposed to know what's going on. I'd be a little afraid to say, oh yeah, I think there's a dollar bill in that box and be wrong, right? It's okay to be wrong. That's how we learn to build the connection. That's how we learn to work through that. So see what resonates with you. See how that feels. Send me an email before the next show. So nothing received after Wednesday at noon will be considered. And I'm not going to give you any help for those of you that are putting guesses in the comments. You got to send it in. All right. What is coming up here on the Chat with Charlie show? On the 15th, we have evidential medium Kim Coots joining us. She is a certified psychic medium and master medium. Kim has a very inspirational story, which you guys, everybody has an inspirational story in different settings. But she comes in to talk about how she began researching evidential mediumship after she was looking for understanding in dealing with the loss of her child and her mother, and how that transformed her life and led her to where she is today. So that is going to be a really great show, very inspiring for her to bring in that information and sit down and really have that vulnerable conversation with you guys. I love it, Courtney. Thank you for giving everybody confidence. I like it. All right. On the 29th, Ellie, right? We're back in the mix with Ellie. Ellie will be joining us. And all right, there have been, I don't know if you guys flip through the news channels like I do, some very interesting things that have come up on major news outlets and TikTok. So we're going to talk next week about a story that just came out that I saw yesterday, actually on the Fox News platform, that talked about an individual who had put up cameras, outside cameras. They wanted to catch deer on their camera, and they caught something else. And I'm just going to say, you can look it up before then. But to intrigue you, let's just picture cladly dressed women eating an animal carcass. I don't know how you'd feel, but I would freak out if that came up on my deer camera. We're also going to talk about, this one's TikTok inspired, of a conversation from a woman who actually had sued her parents when she was younger because she said she did not give them consent to be conceived. And her TikTok comments about consulting a psychic medium before conceiving children to see if they want to come here. We're going to have some very interesting topics outside of those, so make sure you tune into In the Mix. And if you see any topics or any news articles like that, send them to me, chatwcharlie@gmail.com, so we can discuss those. All right. I was going to pull some cards, and I was shuffling the cards, but really what Spirit wants to talk about, so we're not doing cards, sorry guys, is us hiding away, right? And we do it, whether it's, I hid away my abilities, but we all hide parts of ourselves. And yes, I agree, times and places to show things and to be who we are. Sometimes we have to be a little bit more professional. But what lengths are we going to hide things that we're insecure about? For me, guys, I haven't worn shorts in 30 years because I'm insecure about my legs. I've always had beefy legs. I wear shorts now, right? Why should I walk around sweating? Because I'm worried you might not like seeing me in shorts. And how many of us do that? That's just one example. How many of us dye our hair because we want to look better for other people? How often do we do things for ourselves that allow us to just simply be who we are, where we're not trying to fit into a social standard, into somebody else's standard? How do we be who we are? This life is here to be lived, right? We're here to feel things. We're here to, I love that, Courtney. I was the exact same though, the shorts. Now my legs are beefy and tan. Mine are almost tan, right? And you guys can't tell, but my face is tanner than normal. I've been enjoying the sun. That and my freckles just fill in and make me look tanner. And I love that because we have one life to live. If you're not going out to And that's not what I'm talking about, Jackie, is like the tattoos. I see you say you wanted a tattoo, and she's referring to a gallery event that I was in where she had gotten a reading. I'm talking about not going swimming with your kids because you're insecure about the way you look in your swimsuit because of how other people might judge you. What are you robbing yourself from, right? What are you robbing yourself from? You're robbing yourself from your own life. And that's what Spirit's coming in for. Spirit is coming in and telling us to stop. We are all here for a specific reason. It might not be a grand reason that we don't see as granditures, but it's a specific reason. And if we do not live our life, if we do not actively participate and we continue to hold back who we are, what are we stealing from not only ourselves, but then others? What blessings are we not giving others because we're afraid to be who we are? What inspiration are you not passing on to others because you're afraid to be that example for somebody else? Speaking your truth, being who you are. I'm not saying, if you're Ed Gein, maybe you should hold back a little bit about being yourself. But that true motivation, that pure motivation that comes from Spirit to enjoy your life. Wear the tank top. Who cares if you don't have muscular arms? Just stop sticking yourself in somebody else's box. Stick yourself in Spirit's box. I bet your perspective will change. All right. So that's the lecture from Spirit. Thank you for letting me be the conduit. I always appreciate your guys' time and being here and tuning into the platform. There's tons of great shows on WLTK-DB. Make sure you check them out, right? Don't just tune in for me. Tune in to the other shows. See what they have to offer. Yes, Courtney, be you. And tonight, reminder, you can catch me here again. I co-host with Rob Thompson for The Universe. And tonight we have Blake Sinclair coming on the show. He is an author, spiritual guru, and mystic. I know Rob is going to be really interested in talking to Mr. Sinclair about his books. I'm really interested in discussing with him how he bridges the gap from religion to the metaphysical, right? Because it's all connected. It's just sometimes we don't read in between the lines. So tune in for those conversations tonight at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch all the other shows here on WLTK-DB. Support the station. And as always, if you missed some shows, hop onto Podbean or wherever you download your music and find me there. Until next week, be well.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.